Take it away.
Thank you, Stephen, for asking me to do this. It's always a privilege and an honor to really share in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous because I owe my life to it. And I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful to see these smiling faces in front of me, even though it's Zooming. And Zooming is better than not turning the message at all. And I'm grateful for it. I do appreciate the opportunity to do this, and I've done it before. Daniel, my buddy over here, is very nice about bringing me down when I have a Zooming commitment. And he always sets his computer up. He works in it. He's a computer expert. And he's also the first member of our group that got sober and has stayed sober now for 23 years. Todd, you might ought to consider letting him speak on this thing one night. He does an excellent job and he's a powerful member of Alcoholics Anonymous. Anyway, I am from Sanford, North Carolina, but my home group is in Southern Pines, North Carolina, 32 miles away. And I'm one of the guys that helped start that group 23 years ago. And I've been traveling 32 miles one way, twice a week to go to that group. And it's very few weeks I've missed in those 23 years. I had real good reasons or commitments when I did miss, and I'm grateful for that. My sobriety date is February 16th, 1964. And if I can make it to the 16th of February, I have very good confidence and hope that I will make it. I'll have 58 years. And it's only through the grace of God and this program and the wonderful people in Alcoholics Anonymous who helped me find a way of life whereby not only did I lose the obsession to drink, but I found a way to be happy, joyous, and free for the most part. It doesn't mean that I haven't had some problems down through the years. I've had several in the last several months. A guy run into my brick wall and tore it down and tore my mailbox down. My refrigerator finally knocked off after 42 years, and I had to replace it. And now my septic tank is full. I gotta have it pumped. But I had some problems, and I'm taking care of them one at a time. And I'm grateful for that. I have the ability to do it today, and I haven't got drunk over any of it. I am an alcoholic. I'm a low bottom drunk, and you'll find that out in just a few minutes. And I'm grateful that the program of Alcoholics Anonymous is stronger than the obsession, the compulsion, the biology of the body that I have that has been removed from me. My book tells me on page 85 that I have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. And I believe that with all my heart, and I walk with the confidence that I can stay sober the rest of my days, one day at a time. 88 is not a bad age to be. It's a whole lot better than the alternative. And I like to be seen rather than viewed. It's a big difference. But I am an alcoholic, and I know I've been an alcoholic since I was 20 years old, because right after I started drinking, I didn't drink much. Some guys run around with me because I had an automobile. They drank beer, and after a while, they invited me to join them. And I tasted of the beer, and it just did not taste good to me. I didn't like it. And I would pour out a lot of beer. We'd be at a ball game or race or down at the lake, and don't be drinking beer and get high. And I would pour my beer out on the ground when they weren't looking. I didn't want them to know I was drinking so little. I wanted to impress them, letting them know that I was drinking. I didn't drink any whiskey until 1953. The Korean War was in progress, and I was drafted. Uncle Sam sent for me when I had to go at 19 years of age. Went to Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and stayed there until early October. In November of that year, I had been reassigned to Fort Lee, Virginia, in the Quartermaster Corps. And on a Friday night, I had a 3-day pass. I went home to Roxborough, North Carolina, where I was born and raised. Went home, and some buddies found out I was there, and they came over and picked me up to go with them to a dance that night. And I went with them to that dance. I had been to that dance before, but I had never danced. I'd never felt like dancing in my life. Uh, I was shy, timid, backward, country, uneducated, and I'd stand around and watch you folks have a good time. You drank, laugh, talk, dance, smooch. I wanted to do all that, but I couldn't. I was too awkward, too backward, too shy. And that night I went to the dance with that Army OD uniform on. I had put little pins up on the shoulders to decorate the uniform. I had been at the PX that afternoon, and I earned an awful lot of medals that I had on that night. And I had a flat top half cut about like it is tonight, except it was a lot thicker and a different color. And I'm standing at the heater that night when this lady came up to the window and bought her ticket, and then she came in the door. And when she came in the door and started walking across that room, I recognized her. I had never didn't know her name, but I had heard some tales about her that would really curl your hair. And she came walking straight over to that heater where I was. Apparently that uniform attracted her. And she began talking to me, and people began looking that way. And I was embarrassed. My preacher brother had told me that if I ever got involved with another woman, I drank white whiskey, I would go to hell, and I didn't want to go to hell. And I'm talking to her, and people are looking at me and whispering to each other, and I don't know what it was about. And finally, she asked me would I escort her out to the car. And I'm right out of basic. I got my medals on, and maybe it's my patriotic duty. And I went out to my car with her across that well-lit parking lot. We got in that old Chevrolet, and she hit the starter, and it sputtered a little bit and started up. Then she reached over, turned the radio on, got that country and western music, and then she reached way up on the front of my knees to hit that heater button. Some of you old folks know where those heaters used to be on the car, up on that glove compartment. And she reached way back there, hit that button, and started that heater up. When she come back up into the seat, she put her arm around me and started whispering some things to me and was trying to start me up. And I'll tell you, I was ill at ease and discontent. I was upset. I didn't know how to react to this situation. And it wasn't long before she was smooching me, and I was really getting upset. And she saw she won't make no progress. She reached up on the seat and came out with a pint of white moonshine whiskey. Got 2 cups out of the glove compartment, poured out 2 drinks. And she's holding that whiskey in her hands, looking at me. And I'm thinking about what my preacher brother had said, my mom and dad had said, I'd heard preachers say it. And I'm looking at her, and I'm looking at the whiskey, and I'm looking at them. They were well endowed, quite well exposed. And I looked at them, and them told me to take a drink. And I took it. And we sat in that car about 15, 20, 30 minutes. And I had 2 or 3 more cups of that whiskey. When I had gotten in that car that night, I was timid, shy, country, backward, uneducated. Slowly, I evolved into the type of person I've always wanted to be. I became 6'8", 268, tall, dark, handsome, very articulate, knowledgeable, and I knew that the self-confidence I have now, that she was going to really enjoy being with me that night. And I can't tell you everything that happened, uh, but about 2:30 Sunday morning, I'm back home in my bed upstairs where I had slept since I was a kid. My uniform is laying over on the other bed. If I haven't puked on it, I haven't gotten it dirty. And I'm laying in that bed fighting off sleep. I don't ever want to sleep. I just want to think about Saturday night over and over and over. How I had grown up and become a man. How that I had found a magic ingredient that enabled me to be the type of person I wanted to be. It enabled me to get out there with you and laugh, talk, dance, socialize, and have a ball. I could act just like you did under that influence. And I know that mom and dad and my preacher brother had lied to me. They said that booze was something that had sent me to hell and I had been in heaven on Saturday night. And I made up my mind that Sunday morning as I lay down in that bed, said, come next Friday, I'll be buying my first pint of whiskey and I'll be going home again. And that going home again on Friday night when I had the chance became a habit. Over and over, week in after week, drinking on Friday night and Saturday night, back at that dance den, having a ball. And that went on for quite a while. And eventually, as a result of that habit I had formed and continually drinking on weekends, I found out at Fort Lee that I could go into Richmond, Virginia during the week, get into those honky tonks and dance halls, and that booze would have the same effect in Richmond, Virginia that it had in Roxborough, North Carolina. And I really enjoyed it. I couldn't understand why the guys I was running with would not drink on the way back to the barracks. If booze was around, I felt like it was supposed to be drank. And it became a problem to me. But I got out of the Army in 55 with an honorable discharge, the rank of PFC, went back to Roxborough, enlisted in the National Guard just in case I would decide to go back in the Army. Enrolled in high school to get that extra money. I got a job at the mill working third shift, weaving automobile upholstery. And I had the money coming in and I bought me a green Hudson Hornet. But it wasn't long before I had a driving under the influence. And I lost my license and I dropped out of school. And during the next 18 months, I was fired and hired over and over again at that mill where I worked. I dropped out of school because it was too hard to get that. And I tell you this, in that school, I didn't get the highest grades, but I sure was the highest of anyone in there. And that went on for several months. But some 18 months later, October of 1956, I had been going with a girl for 3 or 4 months. And I'm deciding to go back into the Army because of other charges that I had pending. Several driving charges that the prosecuting attorney told my father that in the event that I was found guilty on any of those, I'd probably pull some time. But he said if Wallace will go back on active duty and get out of town, I'll drop those charges. And he did that. But I have no real good reason to have those charges dropped and to get out of town. My girlfriend told me that we should get married. And I said, I'm in no condition to get married. She says, the condition I'm in, we should get married. Mama encouraged me to. She wanted a grandchild. So I married this girl. 6 days later, it was 9 days later, I went back on active duty. Through the National Guard, went down to Fort Jackson again, and re-up for 6 years. I wanted to get as far away from Roxborough as I could, and Korea had been my choice. And I was on the ship en route to Korea when we went through Adak, Alaska. And I remember standing at the rail of that ship one morning, and I got to thinking about my life since I had started drinking booze. I had had an awful lot of trouble. I had lost jobs. I had made promises to my family. I had gone to jail time after time after time. And it was just a rat race over and over and over again. And I couldn't understand why I couldn't drink and have a good time and be responsible like some other people I saw that was doing that. But I was a guy that when I began drinking, I absolutely could not stop. And I was totally unpredictable when I drank. I didn't know where I would go, who I'd get up with, who I'd insult, assault, steal from, give money to, or do something. Something would usually happen when I started drinking like that because I did not know when to stop. And I had blackout after blackout after blackout down through the years. And my life in Korea was fine for the first half of the months, 5.5 months. On that ship, I had made up my mind. I had gone back in with the rank of corporal I had made in the National Guard. And I said, when I get to Korea, I'm going to work hard and make sergeant. You get promoted much easier overseas than you can in the States. 5.5 months into my tour in Korea, I had been Battalion Soldier of the Month 3 times. I had been Company Soldier of the Month 5 consecutive times. The captain put my name before the promotion board and I was promoted to sergeant. That same weekend on a Saturday afternoon, Sergeant and company were going down to the NCO club. And they told me when I was coming down the hill from the shower, that it was my responsibility to come down to the club and buy them some drinks to celebrate my promotion. And I went down to the NCO club about an hour and a half after they had met me on the company area there. I joined them in the club. Our girlfriends were already in there. They were looking good. They were buying drinks, putting one in a jukebox and holding those girls close, and they looked good with those miniskirts on. And I got to thinking, and I'm looking at them. Man, I ain't had nothing since I've been over here but hard work. And I sat there a little while and I looked at those pretty sergeant stripes I had on and thought about how well I had done. That I've been over here now 18 months, or 5.5 months. And I haven't had a drink. Surely after all this time, I could take a drink and celebrate with these guys. I ordered a beer and nothing happened. And since nothing happened, I waited a little bit and I ordered another beer. Still nothing happened. So I had another one. And shoot, I was doing so well, I thought, now, a double shot of old granddad and Coke would be fine. Well, I had a couple of those. And a 2.5 hour period, the bouncers in the club found it necessary to throw me out of the club right through the screen door. I mean, it was closed, but I went through that screen when they threw me out. And I don't remember getting back to the company area that night. Sunday morning, I reached over on my dresser in that NCO room. It got a half a fifth that was on the dresser. Monday morning, I reached over on the dresser and got a different half a fifth and began drinking. And my problems in Korea began to crop up immediately. And it wasn't but about 30, 60, 90 days, something like that, that the company commander was really getting fed up with my actions and my inability to perform like I had performed. He had been real proud of me and had always picked me to be the payroll guard when he went to get the payroll. And I was proud of that and grateful for that chance. And I had gotten along so well. But now I didn't look like that at all. When I walked around the company area, I couldn't hold my head up and look at people. Because of the road I was living, my appearance had changed, my actions had changed, my smell had changed. It was different. And But I was lucky that I got out of Korea with the rank of corporal, went to Fort Lee, Virginia. And just like later on, when I went to Fort Lee, I carried my alcoholism with me. It wasn't long before I was in trouble there. Driving on the influence, after license revoked. You see, I got my South Carolina license illegally. And then when I got to Virginia, I got a Virginia license illegally. They didn't have computers that worked then like they do now. And I got those licenses. But they were taken away. I lost, well, I didn't lose them. I knew where they were. They were either in Raleigh, Richmond, or South Carolina, Columbia to be in fact. And guys in the day room would look at me with contempt when I walked through because I was untidy and I would smell like a bill barrel. And the company commander was getting complaints about me from the mess sergeant. He didn't like the idea that I could come into the mess hall and vomit on the floor in front of all those guys. And I'm ashamed of that even today, that I was acting that way, but it's just the way that I was as a drunk. Always getting in trouble doing things that I shouldn't. And my first wife number one, divorced me after I got booted out of the service. The company commander had put my name before 12 officers, and they declared that I was alcoholically unfit. I no longer looked like the soldier of the month that I had been in Korea, and they booted me out of service. I lived in Virginia for a year after I served my 90-day jail sentence for all those charges. I had to pull 52 days of it. And the new girlfriend I had was only 19 or 20 years older than I. And she was up there at the parking lot that morning to get me out of jail. And when I walked out that door, she got out of the car and came around to the trunk of the car and opened it. When I got up there, she pulled out a pint of whiskey. And I said, Ruth, I'll never go to another jail as long as I live. And she said, let's drink to it. I took the cap off that whiskey and took a pull on it, a couple of them, handed it to her, and then got that water turned up. Looks like the way I looked, I think. I turned that bottle up in that parking lot. But Ruth took that bottle in, she spit a snuff out, and then she drank a little bit of it. She had all her grandkids in the back seat of that car, and I lived there with her for a year. I got several jobs, lost them, went to jail several times, and she'd get me out. And mom and dad found out where I was, and they wanted me to come home. So one day when Ruth went to work, I went out on US 1 and was hitchhiking back to Roxbury. I moved in with mom and dad, and they said, no drinking. If you start drinking, you're out of here. They convinced me I need to go to church with them, and for the next 5.5 months, again, a period of dryness or sobriety. It was dryness most for it because I really and truly entertained the idea of drinking over and over and over again and had to fight it off. But during that 5.5 months, dad had introduced me to another lady that was 8 years older than I. She had a good job, nice car, she had a nice home, she was divorced. And after 5.5 months, she asked me to marry her. Well, this would be number 2. So we got married, and I moved in with her. And for the next year, I was hired and fired over several times. Finally got a job as a carpenter's helper. And during that year, after I had been married to her for 3 weeks, we went to a dance. And that night I got up and tried to dance with her. I had 9 left feet. I couldn't dance. The music didn't sound right. And I just just felt ill at ease and discontent. And she went to the bathroom with a friend of hers, and that friend of hers' husband was sitting across from me. Well, he passed a glass of old granddad over the table to me. And when Sue got back to the table, I was ready to dance. We got up and did dance for a couple of numbers. But when the dance was over that night, they had to wake me up at the back of the room where I had passed out. And that was the kind of drinking I did for the summer of '52. And Sue was so thoroughly disgusted with me, but she put up with it and tried with all her heart and might to get me to quit, and I couldn't do it. I'd promised her, and I'd promised mom and dad, I'd promised my cousin, who was my boss man at the mill, and my boss man when I was doing carpenter work, I promised him I'd quit, but I couldn't stay quit. I could quit, but I couldn't stay quit. And I go right back again. And in 1963, one morning, after 4 days and 3 nights of complete blacked out drunkenness, my wife came in and woke me up 5:30 in the morning, asked me, was I going to work? And I said, yes. And she went back into the kitchen to finish preparing breakfast. When I attempted to get off the bed, there was something under my pillow that was hard. It made a clanging noise. And it was a pint, 2 pints of white moonshine whiskey. And I sat down on the side of that bed that Monday morning, knowing that I'm supposed to go to work. And I began drinking that white whiskey and smoking cigarettes. And Sue came in the door and saw what was going on. And she walked up in front of me, and I can assure you, she did not sound like a Baptist Sunday school teacher that morning. She began telling me some things that she had told me many times before that year. And this time I knew that she was speaking with more authority than ever, and she meant business. She said I was a sorry, no good, low down drunk. This was all I'd ever be, no good to her, no good to my daughter. And that when she got home from work that afternoon, she wanted me and my mess out of her house. And she went on to work that morning. And I don't remember leaving home that morning, but I learned later that I had left home sometime late that morning, went down to the beer bootleg joint, called a taxi, and went to town. And it was in town that I was drunk. And sometime later at a trial, the judge asked the sheriff to stand and present the evidence against the young man. And the sheriff said that he had been in his office on Monday afternoon about 4 o'clock. And he looked out the window and saw me on the street drunk, and he was going to come out and arrest me. I said the phone rang on the other side of the room. He went over to answer it. His secretary was not working that day. She was sick and out of work. And he said he talked on the phone for a couple of minutes and came back to the window and didn't see me. And he said he figured the police had me or would have me shortly thereafter, and it was extremely cold. It was down in the 20s, and he forgot about it. And I've wished a million times that he had arrested me that Monday afternoon, because when he's presented the evidence to the judge listened as he drank a glass of ice water. Then he looked at me and said, young man, stand. He said, for the sentences for the crimes committed during this Monday afternoon, I hereby sentence you to the North Carolina Department of Correction for a period of 40 years and natural life at the expiration. Take him out of here, sure. And 3 days later, I was handcuffed and shackled by 22 other people and taken into Central Prison. And at Central Prison, in about 10 days, I was assigned to be a clerk in the record office, taking personal histories of new inmates that were being processed and working in the record division. And I went to doing that. Within 3 weeks that I went to work in that shop, those other guys had taken a liking to me and felt I would be an okay guy that they could confide in. And they told me about things that was being smuggled in and alcohol could be got from the hospital if you had a little money. And I began getting that alcohol. And then I began taking anything that would help me sleep because I absolutely could not sleep unless I was on the influence. And then this went on from in February up until June. In June, a friend asked me to attend a meeting that I didn't know anything about. It was called Alcoholics Anonymous. And I went to that meeting under the influence. Two other things happened. I had gotten fired from that job and had been sent to work in the print shop. Also, a man had been waiting in the bedroom at the house for my wife when she got home from work one Monday morning. She had been working third shift. She was robbed, assaulted, and kidnapped. And I'm in Central Prison. And it was about 2 or 3 weeks later that I found out about this. My family notified me. And come that September, I was on the yard at Central Prison. And I had been attending AA every meeting, one meeting a week, just to speak a meeting and be a drunk log. And I'd be attending that meeting every week religiously, but I wasn't getting involved. The people would share their experience, strength, and hope. They tell those inmates, I love you. Sometimes they'd hug them, sometimes they'd shake hands. I knew it was love already there because two inmates on the back row was holding hands every meeting night. And I didn't want no part of it. And I continued to do my thing. And on February 16th, 1964, I got drunk one Sunday afternoon, dug up some money I had hid down in the window near the chapel. And I went to see the bootlegger and I went to my cell block and I proceeded to get drunk. And I come to that night sometime after 8 o'clock. I'm 40 feet up on the fourth floor. A two-man cell, but I was in there alone. And when I came to that night, I felt bad and I was hungover. And I knew I had enough stuff under my pillow that I could take and drink. And I reached under the pillow and got that last bottle of alcohol and those other things and took them all down. And suicide had been on my mind for several weeks. And I said, tonight is the ideal time. The world will be better off. Took everything I had and drank that alcohol, knowing that this door was going to slide open at 9 o'clock. Every night it would slide open. Guys watching television, go in the cells at 9 o'clock. If they did go in then, they'd have to stay the night through 11. And I stood at that door. And I know that that night, you can call it sickness, blacking out, passing out, anything you choose to call it. But I believe that night, God in his infinite mercy looked at this sick, hopeless, helpless drunk with no hope for the future and inability to face life in its present circumstances. Suicide was the thing that I should do. But I know that God gave me another chance that night. I came to, I'm on my knees in front of the commode, and I'm crying and praying, and vomiting. And I passed out. And I came to later on, crawled into my bed and laid out till morning. And in the morning when I went out of my cell, guys said to me, what was going on in there last night? I said, what are you talking about? They said, last night you cried out loud enough for everybody to hear you. God, if you help me get back to AA, I'll try. And I had gone back to AA. Some 2 weeks later, I had taken pamphlets from the literature rack, taken them to my cell block, and I read them at night. I wouldn't go down and watch television. And some 2 weeks later, Tom Alistair was alcoholic rehabilitation officer working for the state. He had 7 years of sobriety at that time. And I talked with him that night. And he reached over the literature rack and got a second edition of the big book and gave it to me and told me what I needed to do with it. And I got into that book and began to read it. And I began to get active in the group. I'd read that book at night and study it, and I'd try and practice the steps. And I couldn't make much progress with them because there was nobody to teach me. Tom had other prisoners he had to work with, and this went on for a while. And finally, I was doing other things in the group, became coffee man, setup man, librarian. They elected me secretary because I could type, and I began typing letters and typing prison rosters of the group. It was over 100 members, and I was doing this. And I had to do it when I was working in the print shop. Now I'd have to do it on Saturday morning. He would get a typewriter and they'd move it to the library, and I could sit in there and write those letters to Tom and do those rosters and so forth. Eventually, Tom was going to have an office over in the prison rather than at prison headquarters. And he was going to get a clerk to work for him. And 7 different people tried for that job. And I was the one they selected, and I began the full-time clerk in that job. Well, after a while, in May of 1968, the prison riot came about where about 7 people were shot dead. Others were beat up with baseball bats and so forth. And I was one of those that was getting beat up by guards with baseball bats, and it injured my hip and my head and my arm and the bones on this side of my face, this side of my face, were broken in 3 places, and they could not settle them. They're out of place today, but they grew back. And it was tragic. I know that I had another life-saving experience. When those guards was beating me, the highway patrol came into the west gate and saw what was going on there, and they made them stop. Well, I went into the hospital and stayed for a couple of weeks. And then after I got out of the hospital and was able to hop around on this bad leg, I was given a job as a clerk for the warden, for the doctor who was the director of the prison hospital. And I was working in that hospital for several months. When one day a guard came in and says, "Come on, Wallace, you got to go with me." They carried me to the back hall of Central Prison, and I couldn't think of anything I'd done. And anyway, to make a long story short, what it was, D. Lee Bounds, the director of prisons at Tom's request, had requested that he let Wallace Bryant be moved out to the honor grade unit to work as his clerk in the public drunkenness program, whereby that I could be his clerk and work in that program and work with those drunks. And D. Lee Bounds, even though I was not in honor grade, they moved me out there. And for the next 2 years, I did that. 2 years later, I was moved to the Sanford Advancement Center when Tom was moved up there. And it was 3 years later, 4 years later, that as a result of being in that community setting, that Governor Hunt took a look at my record, and he cut all that time down to 35 years. In June of 1981, June 8th, 1981, I was paroled. I had married wife number 3 in prison. They had given me permission when I was working with the phone company on work release to build a home, and I'm still living in that home today out in the Deep River community. I had married 3 years before I got out to wife number 3. She's at home tonight. I kissed her good night, a good night before I came down here, but I'm sure gonna know it when I get back home. But it was a joy to work with Tom those years and to learn how that I could be effective in working with other drunks, because he certainly knew how to work with other drunks. He was a great guy. I never imagined that life in Alcoholics Anonymous could be so long, but I have had the joy of not only marrying again, not only the first time I ever owned a house or having a house, the first time I've ever had the opportunity to travel the way that I've traveled in Alcoholics Anonymous. Not only was I active in the Central Carolina group in Fayetteville, Good John was my buddy, and he's dead now. And I've also been in Florida and in Ontario, Canada, Boca Raton, Florida, speaking at these places. And the biggest place I ever spoke was in 2015. To my surprise, I had to speak before 10,000 people at the International AA Convention in Atlanta, Georgia. Never did I dream that such things as this would happen to me, and I'm grateful for it. I know that God in his infinite mercy in the program of AA and loving people in Alcoholics Anonymous gave me a chance. They didn't care about my past. What they cared about was what God in his infinite mercy and the program of AA had done for me and brought me from where that I was despicable, not fit for society, had to be chained up like an animal and placed behind the bars. And I have been going behind the bars, carrying the message for many, many years now until the pandemic come up and they cut it out. We no longer are allowed to go into the prison areas. But I'm still active in my home group, doing these Zooming things for people and working with others. And so one of my sponsors picked up a 12-year chip Sunday night. I'm grateful because I am trying a day at a time to pass it on. Thank you, and I love you, and appreciate you being in front of me tonight, if it is out of distance. Love you.